Addendum 2 to Chapter 2, The Unknown Xenophanes, in Karl Popper's The World of Parmenides. Some principles for a new professional ethics based on Xenophanes' theory of truth. I should like to put forward some principles for a new professional ethics, which, for a long time, I have felt is badly needed. Principles based on Xenophanes' theory of truth and connected with his moralism and his intellectual honesty. For this purpose, I shall first characterize the old professional ethics and perhaps caricature it a little in order to compare and contrast it later with the new professional ethics that I propose. Should this new ethics turn out to be a better guide for human conduct than the traditional ethics of the intellectual professionals, the ethics of scientists, physicians, lawyers, engineers, architects, and also civil servants, and most importantly, the ethics of politicians, then I may be allowed to claim that new things can be learnt, even in the field of ethics. Both the old and the new professional ethics are based, admittedly, upon ideas of truth, of rationality, and of intellectual responsibility. But the old ethics was based upon the ideas of personal knowledge and of the possibility of reaching certainty, and therefore upon the idea of authority. The new ethics, by contrast, is based upon the ideas of objective knowledge and of uncertain knowledge. This means a fundamental change in thinking, and with it, a change in the role played by the ideas of truth, of rationality, and of intellectual honesty and responsibility. The old ideal was to possess both truth and certainty, and, whenever possible, to guarantee truth by means of a proof. This ideal, which to this day is widely accepted, corresponds to the personal ideal of the sage, not of course to the Socratic ideal of wisdom, but rather to the Platonic ideal of the initiated seer, of the Platonic philosopher who is, at the same time, a royal ruler, an authority. The old imperative for the intellectual was, be an authority, know everything, at least in your chosen field of expertise. Once you are recognized as an authority, your authority will be protected by your colleagues, and you must, of course, reciprocate by protecting their authority. The old ethics here described leaves no room for mistakes. Mistakes are not allowed, and therefore the confession of mistakes is not allowed. I do not need to stress that this old professional ethics is intolerant. Moreover, it has always been intellectually dishonest. It leads, especially in medicine and politics, to the covering up of mistakes for the sake of authority, closing ranks. I suggest, therefore, that a new professional ethics, fit not only for scientists, be based upon the following 12 principles. 1. Our objective conjectural knowledge continues to exceed more and more what one person can master. Therefore, there are no authorities. This holds true even within the various medical specialties. 2. It is impossible to avoid all mistakes, or even all those mistakes that are, in themselves, avoidable. Mistakes are continually being made by all scientists. The old idea that mistakes can be avoided and that one is therefore in duty bound to avoid them must be revised. It is itself a mistake. 3. It still remains our duty to do everything we can to avoid mistakes, but it is precisely in order to avoid them that we must be aware of the difficulty in avoiding them, and of the fact that nobody succeeds in avoiding them all. Not even the most creative scientists who are guided by intuition succeed. Although we can do nothing without it, intuition is more often wrong than right. 4. Mistakes may be hidden in our best corroborated theories, and it is the specific task of the scientist to search for such mistakes. Finding that a well-corroborated theory or a much-used practical technique is mistaken may be a discovery of the greatest importance. 5. We must therefore change our attitude to our mistakes. It is here that our practical ethical reform must begin. For the attitude of the old professional ethics leads us to cover up our mistakes, keep them secret, and to forget all about them as soon as possible. 6. The new basic principle is that in order to avoid making more mistakes than we need make, we must learn from the mistakes we do make. To cover up mistakes, therefore, is the greatest intellectual sin. 7. We must, therefore, be constantly on the lookout for mistakes, especially our own mistakes. When we find them, we must remember them, and we must scrutinize them from all aspects in order to understand better what went wrong. 8. A self-critical attitude, frankness, and openness towards oneself become, therefore, parts of everyone's duty. When we draw other people's attention to their mistakes, we should always remember that we ourselves have made similar mistakes. And we should remember that the greatest scientists have made great mistakes. This is certainly not meant to imply that our mistakes are generally forgivable. We must never let our attention slacken. But it is humanly impossible to avoid making mistakes. And when we draw the attention of others to their mistakes, we might help them by pointing this out too. 10. We must be clear in our minds that we need other people to discover and correct some of our mistakes, as they need us, especially people who have grown up with different ideas in a different cultural atmosphere. This too leads to toleration. 11. We must learn that self-criticism is the best criticism, but that criticism by others is a necessity. It is nearly as good as self-criticism. 12. Rational or objective criticism must always be specific. It must give specific reasons why specific statements, specific hypotheses appear to be false, or specific arguments invalid. It must be guided by the idea of getting nearer to objective truth. In this sense, it must be impersonal, but also sympathetic. I ask the reader to consider what I am proposing here as suggestions. They are meant to point out that, in the field of ethics too, one can put forward suggestions which may be discussed and improved by critical discussion, as Xenophanes and his successors, it seems, were among the first to discover. The more or less universal acceptance of the conjectural character of science has meant a fundamental change in the attitude of scientists towards refutations of mistaken theories, even of their own. A similar change in attitude to human fallibility has not yet taken place in politics and within our different institutions. If I dream of a democratic utopia, it will be one in which a parliamentary candidate can hope to attract votes by the boast that he discovered during the last year 31 serious mistakes made by himself and managed to correct 13 of them, while his rival discovered only 27, even though he admitted correcting 13 of his own mistakes. I need not say that this will be a utopia of toleration.